Welcome to Yeshiva Daf, sponsor Lunishma Sav Yaakov Shalom and Leah Basitzrok. We're holding in Shavuos Daf Lamed Ches. We're starting in the top of the Amud, first line, and the two dots. The Gemara says, Shavuos HaPikadon, Keitzad. How do you know what is Shavuos HaPikadon? Tell me Pikadon Shesh Lebiyotcha, etc. So, just as a preview to the following few lines of the Gemara, when you look at the Mishnah that we had in Daf Lamed Vov with base, the Mishnah there said, towards the end of the narrow line, the Mishnah said, if there were five people, 5 people came to somebody and said, give us the Pikadon. And he says, Shvuah she'en lechem biyodi alecha achas. He says to all five, Shvuah, I don't owe none of you. Then he's chayav only one. Because he didn't want Shvuah for all five. But if he said, Shvuah, she'en lecha biyadi, v'loi lecha, remember this lashon, v'loi lecha, so then he's chayav for each one, its own Shvuah. Each one, that's what Amir says. That's the Tarakam. Rabbi Lazar says he has to say Shvuah in the end, and Yeshiva has to say Shvuah for each one. Shvuah lecha, Shvuah lecha, Shvuah lecha. Now, the main part of the Gemara now is going to focus more on Ramir. Let's see the Gemara. It says the Gemara, Tana Rabban. Klal, Einu chayav alachas. Prat, chayav kolachas v'achas de Ramir. When he puts all of them together, he combines all people together, he's going to be chayav only one Shvuah. If he details each one, gives each one his own, he separates each one separately, so he's chayav in each one. Now, Ramir doesn't say, when do you separate, when not? He didn't tell me how you separate. He just told me the rule. The rule is if he colluded everything together, it's one Shvuah. If he gave each one his own Shvuah, so it's multiple Shvuahs. Shvuah loy lecho, ve'loy lecho, ve'loy lecho, chayav kolachas v'achas. So Rita tells us, if he said the ve in between each one, not to you, and not to you, and not to you, so it is chayav in each one. What does Rita come to argue with Ramir? So first of all, before we get to Rabbi Yehuda and Ramir to explain this, like I want to say in a moment, first of all, let's go and finish up the other Amr. Shvuah, chayav kolachas v'achas. Say Shvuah in the end, would to be chayav in each one. Shvuah for him, Shvuah for him. So the second two sheet is brought out in the Mishnah as well. The Blazer holds it to say Shvuah in the end, and according to the Shir, it says Shvuah for each one. Now, what does Ramir Rabbi Yehuda argue? So, Rabbi Yehuda Mashvuah, Klolo Sheramir, Proto Shrabi Yudo, Klolo Shrabi Yudo, Proto Shramir. Meaning, whatever Ramir is considered to be a klal, Rabbi Yehuda is considered to be a prat. Whatever Rabbi Yehuda is considered to be a prat, Ramir is considered to be a prat. Meaning, as Rashi explains, there's two ways to say details. You could say loy lecho, ve'loy lecho, ve'loy lecho. I don't owe not to you, and not to you, and not to you. Or you say, I don't owe not to you, not to you, not to you, without the word, without the ve, without the and. And the Gemara understands now, Rabbi Yehuda, I have two opposite sheets regarding that. According to Rabbi Yehuda, when you say ve and, then you specify Shvuah for each one. If you don't specify and, so you don't say specify Shvuah for each one. And Rabbi Yehuda holds the opposite. When you don't say and, so Shvuah is for each one. If you say and, that's a separation, and you do Shvuah only for the first. That's how Rabbi Yehuda Mashvuah explains. And then, according to this, when Ramir says klal and chayav alachas, it means if you said and prat chayav kolachas v'achas, we didn't say and. Rabbi Yechezkel says no. When you say and ve'loy lecho, everybody agrees that each one gets his own shvuah. Without a vote. Shamer Ramir prat. Ramir holds they're both prat. They're both detailed. Ve'loy lecha and loy lecha, both. Rabbi Yehuda klal. Yehuda says it is a inclusive of everything together. Ve'ezu kol Shamer Ramir started by saying klal leinu chayav alachas, shvuah she'en lechem biyodi. If he didn't say lecha, or ve'lecha, he just said all of you. So, like the simple understanding in the Mishnah, when Ramir says, as the one's going to tell us in a moment, according to Ramir, if he says, if I look out that person, say you owe money, he said, I don't owe to none of you. That is one shvua of everybody, and nobody argues in that. But according to Amir, if he said, not to you, not to you, not to you, or he said, not to you, and not to you, and not to you, not to you, and both of them is chayav for each one, according to Rabbi Yochanan. What's the machlokes Shmuel Rabbi Yochanan? So what comes out? According to Shmuel, Rameir holds only if he said not to you, without the and, he's chayav for each one. But if he said and, he's chayav only one. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, both of them is chayav for each one. What's the machlokes? Says the one Shmuel Dayak B'Braiso. Rabbi Yochanan Dayak B'Mastisa. Shmuel is Dayak from the Losha of the Braiso. And Rabbi Yochanan is Dayak from the Losha of the Mishnah. Shmuel Dayak B'Braiso with the call Rabbi Yudo Ve'Loi Lecho Proto. The Braiso we just quoted. That's when we started out. According to Rabbi Yudo says Ve'Loi Lecho is a detail. Have Michal Desham and the Rameir Doma Klol Have. You see from the response of Rabbi Yudo to Rameir. Rabbi Yudo says Shmuel Loi Lecho Ve'Loi Lecho Chayov. Mashma, why does he have to say that if Rameir just said it? Elamah. He heard Rameir saying that only l'chol without the vav, then you chayav one. Then you chayav in each one. But with the vav, you're not. Comes the reader that says no. With the vav, you chayav in each one. Right? He heard Michal Rameir Doma Klol. I'm going to read the protest. That's what he was coming to argue. Rabbi Yochanan says, don't bring a riot for the brayso. Tavar Rameir Protaf. They both the Protaf to Rameir. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you have to say, which is a little more doichak, but the way the Bryce is written is Rameir says, if he said all of you is one shvul, but as long as he detailed them, regardless if he said ve or not ve, he's chayav for each one. It's called a proto. Because the Rebbe says, I agree with you, but if he said the ve, if you didn't say the ve, I don't agree. So Shmuel, that's the doichak of Rabbi Yochanan. Why is Rabbi Yudo focusing on what he agrees with Rameir? He should focus on what he argues with Rameir. Usually that's what happens. Rameir said a statement. Comes Rabbi Yudo to disagree. So what Rabbi Yudo should say? I agree with you with A, and you may understand you disagree with B, or just say I disagree with you with B. Just go directly to the point. So that's why Shmuel says I don't like the way you explain the Bryce, and that's why I understood differently. Rabbi Yochanan is proving his point from the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, Shmuel says that the klal, says the rule. He says, when is the klala? When do you chayav for all of them together, only one shvul? Because when it says shvul she'en lechem biyodi, that's the example the Mishnah brought. Mechlal develoi lecho prat ave. So mashma from here, as long as I'm specifying each one is a prat. If you would think the veloi lecho as a rule, have the mashal shvur she'en lechem biyodi nishmein et shvur lo lecho v'lo lecho v'lo lecho koshket shvur she'en lechem biyodi. Why do you have to go and tell me? So when he said one big shvur for all of them, I swear I don't know what to all of you, then you have only one, say a bigger chiddush. Say that if he said I don't know what to you, and to you, and to you, he's chayav for also only one. So that's a riot that for our Mishnah's mashma, if I said all of you together, then chayav one. But any other case, chayav each one. Shmuel says, that's the Doichek to Shmuel. So the Mishnah says, Shmuel she'en lechem biyodi, because when you say and, it's like saying all. So you're right, Mishnah could have said it, but it's really exactly the same. So well, 1 second. According to Shmuel, I have another problem. You want to tell me the fact that the Mishnah said that the example when you chayav only one Shmuel is when he says Shmuel she'en lechem biyodi, and then say Shmuel ve. Okay, you're saying ve is equal to lechem biyodi. The problem is, what is the next sentence of the Mishnah? The example the Mishnah brings is ve. That's the example the Mishnah brings. When the Mishnah says you chayav for each one, the Mishnah says, Shvur she'en lechem biyodi no chayav la'achas, Shvur she'en lechem biyodi ve'loi lecho, the ve, chayav l'kol achas la'achas. That's the Mishnah. According to Shmuel, that's the case, you're not chayav for each one. So says the Gemara, that's what I was going to ask. Tran, loi lecho, ve'loi lecho, clearly not like Shmuel. Says the Gemara, Tani, loi lecho. According to Shmuel, the gears to the Mishnah should not be with a ve, should be without a ve. Now the Gemara goes on, continues to quote in the continuation of the Mishnah. Because all the examples the Mishnah brought, it says ve. And according to Shmuel, ve means there's only one Shmuel. So the Gemara's going to ask for each one, and the Gemara's going to answer in each one, that you don't say the ve according to Shmuel. Let's see. Toshma. Ten li pikodoin v'tzumis yad v'gezel v'avedo. So it says over here ve. Ten li pikodoin v'tzumis yad v'gezel v'avedo. Tani tzumis yad gezel v'avedo without a vav. Right? And they really refer to the response. Because he's answering the same lashon. Don't say the ve. It says the Gemara, so in other words, according to Shmuel, this Tana, the way our Mishnah is geared, so is all one big mistake. You have to correct the entire Mishnah. Does that make sense, according to Shmuel, to tell me the entire losh of the Mishnah is a mistake? So then we'll let the Shita of Rebbe. The Shita of Rebbe, that he holds that the Ve doesn't make a difference. So our Mishnah holds the Ve and not Ve is the same. But Rameir himself in the Brisa holds that Ve is considered to be one big shul. I'll tell you what Rashi says, the Rebbe is Mesechus Zvachim. It doesn't matter if he said Ad lechol kazayis levachar kazayis lebachutz. Meaning that you have to have, if a person said two different machshavas on a carbon, so only the first one, two bad machshavas, the first one is chal, the second one doesn't. Unless he did it together. So Shavuos, what does it mean to do it together? If it says Rebbe, it doesn't matter if he says Ve or not Ve. If you had two separate machshavas, it's not together. So that's what you see, that's Rebbe. So what Toshua Medidei. We are right. Because that was the end of our Mishnah. Rameir said that if he said Chito Vesoiro Vekusames, he's chai for each one. So it says Ve Tani Chito Soiro Kusames. So there it's only one place to fix. You take a devos. Maya Filus, what's the Chiddush of Rameir? The Chiddush is that it's Loshen Yochid. It's a singular form. He came and told me you're chayav wheat, I mean multiple wheat, and you chayav soybean, which means multiple barley and multiple spelt. And he says, right? That's what we had in the beginning of the Mishnah. Now comes the end of the Mishnah says that if he says chito, it's as if he says multiple. Says Sa'ira as if he says multiple. Even though he's using Loshen Yachid, it's still considered to be that he's asking for multiple. That's a Chiddush from Rameir. Okay. Says the Gemara, Tenli Pikodon Tzvesiad Gil Avedish Lebiotcho, Tenli Chitim Esoyri, that's all the Mishnah. So you could join together, and this Gemara that we're reading right now is a Gemara that we had earlier in the Masechta. We had this in Daf Chav Gimel. Now what's the case over there? What's the Indian? We have a din, in order to be chayav or pikadon, it needs to be worth a pruta. If it's worth less than a pruta, it's not kfiras moment. And the din by pikadon has to be money. Money is at least a pruta, it has to be a pruta. Now, we're going to say like this. If he's coming, the person coming and claims, you owe me wheat, barley, and spelt in one shot. So you owe me. And he owes, out of all three, he owes pruta together. Meaning, he owes a third of a pruta of wheat, a third of a pruta of barley, a third of a pruta of a spelt. So even though each one on his own is not a pruta, but together they join to be a pruta. That's what Yechezkel holds. But that applies only when you talk about a shvuah that includes all three together. Because if he's saying shvuah against chiti, and a separate shvuah for soyri, and a separate shvuah for kusmin, each shvuah needs to have his own pruta. It's only when the shvuah includes all together. And that's clear. Says the Gemara, they join together. Which means what? In the second case of Amish, Amish is like this. If the owner comes to the one who's holding it and says, you owe me wheat, barley, spelt. And he says, I owe you nothing. And here's the shvuah. So that's considered to be a kloli. Kloli means I'm joining all of them together. Say, I don't owe you neither of them, not chito, not soyer, not because I owe you nothing. I'm doing one shvuah for all three. That's clear. Now, that's the next case of the Mishnah. The owner comes and says, you owe me wheat, you owe me barley, you owe me spelt. He says, shvuah, I don't owe you wheat. Shvuah, so I say, shvuah, I don't owe you barley. Shvuah, I don't owe you spelt. So that's a shvuah for each one. Now the shaila is, because the way the lashon is shvuah she'ein lecha biyadi chitim v'se'oyim v'kusvim. Or chitim v'se'oyim v'kusvim, but they say the vav or not. So he starts the sentence by saying, I don't have wheat, barley, spelt. So you have a shvuah for the wheat, you have a shvuah for the barley, you have a shvuah for the spelt. The shaila is, do you have a fourth shvuah on all of them together? Because the owner comes and says, you have by me, I deposited by you wheat barley spelt. He says, I don't have wheat barley spelt. So wheat is on its own, barley is on its own, spelt on its own. But that I don't have does not include all of them together. Or no, when he says wheat barley spelt, I don't have, it's not a separate thing. That's the machlekes over here. Says the Gemara. Let's see it again. On the prati, chitim, soirim, kosvim, aklol and mechayev. You don't chayev all of them together. Chadom and aklol not mechayev. Chayev the klal as well, right? And what's of Kamino? What Rabbi Yochanan just said. What happens if each one doesn't have a pruto, but together they have a pruto? So if you tell me that when he says I don't have wheat barley spelled, there's four shvuos over here. One of the wheat, one of the barley, one of the spelled, one of all of them together. So on the wheat barley spelled, you not have because they don't have pruto. But the one which is all of them together, you have because there is a pruto joy from all of them together. But if you hold there's only three shvuos, wheat, barley, and spelled, each one is not a pruto. You don't have. That's the discussion. So the Gemara, what is the B'chia talking about? B'chia is talking about when you have 5 people demanding from him, and each one is demanding wheat, barley, and spelt. You have 15 shvuos over here, because it's wheat, barley, spelt, 3, for 5 different people. 3 times 5 is 15. According to the Madama that holds that there's a 4th shvuah over here, who includes all of them together, so it should be 4 times 5, which is 20. That's what he asks. He says stream avion should be 20 because you have one that includes all of them together. So more time the proti kachoshi, the klal lo kachoshi. He says you're right, but I'm not going into the klal. The klal is pashut. I'm not talking about the one which includes all of them together. I'm talking about the chiddush of the Mishnah. We have a shvuah for each one separately. So I'll tell you, for each one separately, I have 15 shvuahs, not including the ones which are combined both a lot together. So more about Tanya B'chia didn't mention another price. He says 20. So how does that work with your thing? You want to say only proti? There's another list in the Mishnah. There's a list of wheat, barley, spelt. And then there's a list of pikodon, sumesyad, gezel aveito. That's 4. 4 pratim. So there it's 20 pratim, not including the klal. So 5 come in demand. 4 things. He tells one of them, so here's one of them, I don't owe you all 4. He gives a shvuah for each one. I owe you this, 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 and this. So clearly for that first one it's 4. But then he says, then he goes, yes, not to you, not to you, not to you, not to you. But it doesn't say to each one of them, I don't owe you to you these 4 things. Now, you chayev only for the first one 4, and the other ones you chayev only 1. With that Yechezkel on base. All 4. What does the B'chia speak about the price we just mentioned? The B'chia brought that it says you have 20 chators, right? So, what is it talking about? Either parish, if he clearly told each one, I'm doing a shvuah for you for these 4 things, for you for these 4 things, for you for these 4 things, and that's I get to 20. So what does B'chia try to tell me? To teach me how to count? I know how to count myself. I don't need B'chia to tell me that. 4 times 5 is 20. What's the chiddush? The chiddush of B'chia is this case. Then he told him to one of them 4, the other one just says and the chiddush of B'chia is you should know that all 4 apply to the second person, all 4 apply to the third, to the fourth, to the fifth, and that's how you get to 20, and that's the conclusion of the Gemara on this. Says the Gemara, now the end of the Mishnah brought a machlekes of Shimon Rabbanon regarding someone who came to somebody that says, Anastu patisas biti, you had a relation with my daughter either by force or willingly, it doesn't matter, you chayav knas, and there's also other chayvus, you have boishes ubgam. So some of the payments are a fine, and some of the payments are a regular tashlum. Says Rav Shimon Yipatra, because you're not going to have shvu and a knas. Says Rabbanan, yeah, but there's other things here too. So on the knas you're not chayav, but the other ones you're chayav. Says the Gemara, what does the Shir say? The main thing he's asking for is like the knas. What's the mashal of Shimon similar to? The person goes to his friend and says, I want wheat, barley, spelt. He says, I don't have any chitim. I don't have. And he's right. The guy told you owe me wheat, barley, spelt. He says, I don't know your wheat. You found it's true. He doesn't know wheat, but he does know barley and spelt. Right? The potter, why? When he said, I don't owe you wheat, that's true. So that's the same thing over here. Because he came in and demanded knas, boisheb gam, and the knas doesn't know, not because he doesn't know it, but because you can't do a shua on knas. So someone will buy you, how can you compare the two? There, he's only denying the wheat. He's not denying the barley and the spelt. He said, I don't know you're not knas, not boisheb gam. So he's not only denying knas, which he doesn't have to pay. What is this more similar to the mashal? Say you owe me wheat, barley, spelt. And he answers, I don't have nothing. Who delays that? So then you find out, he said, I owe you nothing. Not wheat, not barley, not spelt. He's right about the wheat, but not about the barley and spelt. So here he said, you owe me knas, boisheb gami. Knas is not chayav. Boisheb gami is chayav. So he says the Gemara, that's a pshat. According to Shimon, he's coming demanding money. The father is demanding money. He's asking only for the knas, not for the boisheb gam. He's asking for both. That's our gear. So there's another gear. So it says only boisheb gam. The Ma'aker, if they go to like this, knas is a fixed amount. Right, it's now 50, it's a fixed amount. So fixed amount, the person goes and says, you know what? I'm not going to be busy with boisheb gam. You have to go to a base team, evaluate, figure out what it is. I'm not busy with that. I'm just asking for the fixed amount. If I'm not going to ask for knas, where he can admit to be potter. Once he admits he's potter, he's asking for what if he admits he's not potter. So Shiloh's, what is the main tviyah, main claim? Is it against the knas, and then your potter because no shua on knas? Or it's against boisheb gam, and then you chayav because there's shua on boisheb gam, that's Pshat and Mishnah. And with this, we finish the fifth paragraph. We said shua sadron, like shua pigodin, hana shua pigodin be'ezer Hashem. Zok the Mishnah. Shua sadayoni. What is shua sadayoni? Shua sadayoni is when there is a claim in Beis Din, and Reuben comes and tells Shimon, you owe me $100. And Shimon says, he says, I admit 50, but I deny 50. That's called moedim b'mitzvahs. And that's when the yonim apply a shvuah to Shimon. So we'll see now the details. The minimum claim needs to be 2 kesef, right? That's the minimum amount. Rashi says shtei mors kesef, right? That's the third of a dinner. And he has to admit at least a pruto. We'll see in the Gemara exactly what is he admitting out of the claim. If the oidah, what he's admitting, is not the same thing that the person is claiming, he's potter. You owe me 2 monies. No, you have only a pruto. Potter. We'll see in the Gemara why. Because he's asking for silver and he's admitting copper. He's asking for the actual coins. 2 coins of silver, he says no, only copper. That's not what he demanded. He demanded silver. He says you owe me 2 kesef and a pruto. He says so now he asked for both, and he denied 1. Why? This one holds that if he asked for chitim esorim for 2 items and he admitted 1, it's called moedim b'mitzvahs. He's admitting partial. Says you owe me money, I don't. You're potter. You owe me 100, and he says I owe only 50. Chayv. That's moedim b'mitzvahs. You owe to my father 100. And he says it's only 50. Why? He could have denied him, and he can't say anything because it's not him, it's his father. He doesn't know what happened with the father. He comes in the first day, he says, you owe me 100. He says, yes, I do. The next day he says, can you pay me the money that you said you admit that you owe me? Now, what do you mean? I gave it to you. Potter. Well, because I can say, yeah, I pay you back. And the Chabiyodi says, I don't have anything. The next day, for Sunday, he tells him, you owe me money. So you're right. Monday, because he tells him, you owe me money. Where's my money? I never owe you money. Chayav. Because once he admitted, so he was moide, now he can't deny it. Money will be out to so you owe me money. Say, I do. I'll deny the Eli Beidim. He says, okay, but you have to, don't give it to me without aiding. The next day he doesn't give it to me. I gave it to you without aiding. Once he conditioned it to give with aiding, he had to give it with aiding. You're holding a weight of gold. And the Chabiyodi Yechezkel says, no, it's only silver, butter, because he's not admitting what the guy demanded. So he says, you owe me money. You owe me money, and you owe me $100. He says, I don't owe you $100. I owe you $5, 2 quarters, and 5 cents. He's not asking for the actual coins, he's asking for the currency. You owe me the core is a size, a big amount, of tvua. And the Chabiyodi says, no, it's only half a core. The eletach kidneys, sorry, only half a core of kidneys. But why he's asking for tvua, and he's saying kidneys. But he says you owe me fruits. He says kidneys. He's chayav kidneys b'chal pears. Kidneys part of the fruits. He says you owe me wheat. He says I only owe me barley. Pot. He says you chayav even if he says 2 different times. We'll see more what it means. He says I gave you 50 barrels of oil. He says, you gave me 50 barrels, but no oil in them. He says he's asking for the oil and for the barrels. He's admitting the barrels because more than makes us. No, he's not asking for the barrels. He's asking for the oil only. He's admitting the barrels. It's not the same time. I agree with Hartman. The din is by karka you don't din moedim mitzvahs. So if he told him you owe me land and vessels, and he says either one of them yes, one of them no, doesn't matter, you're potter from the shul. If he told him I owe you some of the karka, still it's the karka potter. Mitzvahs a kelim chayo. But he told him like this: you owe me a land worth $1,000. In addition, you owe me tables that each one is worth another 2 tables, each one $500. He says, I owe you only 1 table of $500. So here is moedim mitzvahs on the tables. Because he's demanding 2 tables, he does only 1. Once he does shvu on the table, he does it on the karka as well. And that's what the Mishnah concludes. Which means metaltim, they don't have achayos, means they're immovables. They make, once you have shvu on them, you can pull shvu on the lands as well. That's what we learn from there. Any time you don't do a shvu of tanis chesed because they don't have das. You don't make the cotton do a shvu. And when you the cotton hekdesh, you do a shvu for a cotton hekdesh, and this is of course seems to be a contradiction, and the Gemara is going to explain. Says the Gemara, what is exactly the shvu? You have to give him a shvu the third, right? In other words, you're using the name of what says in the Torah. It says Hashem. You have to use it, give off. It goes back to what we learned earlier. The shvur needs to use Yud Kei Vav Kei, not any other name. I feel the Rabbanon will agree. I feel the Rabbanon down in Bekinui. No. We're not coming to say use Shem Hashem. You can use any names of Hashem to do shvur. But what he means to say, there needs to be shvu amur b'Torah means he needs to hold an item. What's the item? We'll see. The main item is the Sefer Torah. Okay, the Rava so where we see that, that's by Avram gave a shvu to Eliezer. Eliezer had to hold an item. What was the item? The item was the aver of Avram. Toys asked over here, that's not Sefer Torah. He says, no, these are no Sefer Torah. So that was the shvu, that was the chayfetz. He If you did a shvu without a chayfetz, you did a shvu with the name of Hashem, so that's considered to be a mistake. You have to completely change and go back from it. Torah B'dvar Mishnah, he has to take back the din. If you do shvu in a tefillin, not sefer Torah. Now it's the case, Mishnah B'dvar Mishnah B'choyzer. You also can't be tefillin, has to be sefer Torah. Yechezkel can say the role, but Yechezkel can say the apple. You pass like a club and I like a purple. Here you say that the role that will not contribute to be odd. You have to take an item. Yechezkel can say the purple that not contribute to be odd. You take tefillin, yeah, sefer Torah is preferable, but tefillin is also good enough. Shvuah me'umah, shvuah has to be standing. Temichacham Yeshua, temichacham can be sitting. Shvuah b'sefer Torah, temichacham lechatchila b'tefillin. So usually lechatchila you use sefer Torah and not tefillin, but for temichacham you can use tefillin because of his covet, and therefore that's what we do. And that's the idea. The Gemara starts over here that the shvuah needs to be with the chayfetz, and the chayfetz lechatchila should be a sefer Torah. And we'll end this now. I just want to mention one interesting concept over here. Rashi and the Mishnah explain the Mishnah, but he doesn't explain the entire Mishnah, he explains only half. The next half is later in Daf Mem Beis. Rashi there says, in the middle of Amud Aleph, he says, Shachachti milefarish ha-Mishnah ve'ineni mefashikan. I forgot to explain the Mishnah, I'm saying it over here. Interesting phenomenon. Rashi says, I forgot to explain to you the Mishnah before, let me go back to it. And he goes to explain the Mishnah. Interesting thing that you find in Rashi. Question was Rashi or not? That's something to think about. In any case, everybody should have a wonderful day, Be'ez Hashem. Kol Tuv.